Hey guys, so I'm here with Jeremy, who is a WINZ advocate. Basically, that just means talking to people that are sort of getting stuff from WINZ, and I guess helping them sort of talk to WINZ and sort of just helping them get their rights. So we're just going to sort of do a short interview, just around sort of I guess the way WINZ works. Jeremy's experience with clients and I guess working with stuff, and I guess just a general sort of discussion on the current benefit system that we have in here in New Zealand. I think there's a lot of information that not everyone has access to or not everyone has experienced. And I think this is just in light of the recent events with Materia Ture, and also just in terms of the general election, and there's a lot of sort of stuff going on about beneficiaries. I think it's really helpful to have a good discussion just about sort of what these things are and what it's actually like for someone who's dealing with WINZ. So that's pretty much the sort of spiel that we'll start with. So Jeremy, tell me a bit about yourself. Tell me a bit about sort of how you got into this business.
Yeah. So my name's Jeremy, and I'm a beneficiary advocate.
Yeah.
I've been on StudyLink and things like that before, but never actually on a work and income benefit. But the experience is very similar.
Right. Yeah.
As I'm sure everyone knows.
You're just ringing up the phone line and sort of trying to get some answers.
And it's really terrible. But I started with AAAP, started doing some advocacy with them maybe a couple years ago now.
Yeah, so AAAP is?
Auckland Action Against Poverty.
Right, cool.
Yeah, and they're a beneficiary advocacy agency based in, or organisation based in Onehunga.
Yep.
And so I started there and did some advocacy with them for maybe 6 months-ish. But I've since moved on, and I just do a little bit of beneficiary advocacy on the side at the moment.
So now it's sort of more of a voluntary sort of type thing, or?
Pretty much everyone at AAAP are volunteers anyway, so it's always been voluntary.
That's right. I guess so. Now it's just more sort of direct with the people you work with as opposed to for an agency.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So what I'm aiming to do now is I try and put together resources that can help beneficiaries more generally.
Awesome.
And put together little guides and things like this that I can hand out to groups and people to pass on to anyone who might need it.
Right, so I guess like lack of information is a big problem for people that are in these circumstances.
Yeah. I've been into one work in an income office where up on the wall it said knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And that's very, very true. And when you're at work and income, you're sitting here on this side of the table, the case manager's sitting on that side of the table, and they're the one who knows all of the policy. They're the one who knows all of the programs and all of this. Yeah. And so when you're trying to argue your point, they can just say, the policy says no, that's a no.
Right.
Regardless of whether or not it does. And
so they're
it's
not
true. Knowledge is power.
Basically at the moment, they're not really sort of doing everything they can to actually, give the help they're supposed to be giving.
Not at all.
Right. All right. What are the overall benefits to society that you think having our welfare system has?
So I think the benefits are quite obvious. You look at, people starving.
Yeah.
Sure, people are still starving as it sits under our current benefit system, but it's not nearly as bad as it could possibly be. When it comes to homelessness, yes, we've got 40,000 homeless in New Zealand, but at the same time, it could be worse.
Right.
And, the homeless situation that we currently have, it's partially caused by a languishing social security or social welfare system.
Right.
Because, of course, as I'm sure you're aware, the accommodation supplement is currently 12 years out of date.
Right.
And since then, rents have doubled.
Yeah.
And in Auckland, I'm sure it's even
worse than that. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess there's a lot of stuff about how I guess there's a lot of anecdotal evidence about how the welfare system isn't, we don't feel it's performing, or, everyone's seen a rise in homelessness or more people struggling. But has there been like a review of the WINZ system in terms of like, are we still providing like the same level of services, or like is that sort of information sort of being buried a bit?
Those reviews do happen, but they never seem to be very useful.
Right. So you sort of, I guess like you need maybe an independent audit sort of thing to actually like see if it's, you know.
Yeah, that'd be a really great idea.
Yeah.
But
So that's something that's a bit out of our pay scale. But
yeah, that's quite true.
It does seem like that's something that needs to happen at some point. I guess that sort of conversation comes back to you know, whether or not you think you know, someone should die from starvation because they don't have money to live on, because they don't have money to buy food. Like, it comes down to the basic human rights of like, you know, should, you know, do New Zealanders believe that people should die from lack of food? You know, do New Zealanders believe that people should die from exposure if they can't afford a house? Like, you know, what's the level of care that New Zealanders, you know, believe that people should have a right to? And I think in New Zealand, like, we generally do have the idea that, you know, no, people shouldn't die from hunger. People shouldn't die from lack of access to medical care. People shouldn't die from homelessness. So I mean, it's really important that we have some system that prevents those deaths.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just about, you know, the arguments are really just over how that system works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're not that market fundamentalist place that was, you know, the UK and Ireland during the Irish potato famine.
Yeah.
You know, back when that happened, the arguments were, well, these people need to die. The market says they die, so they die.
Right.
And we actually do have that happening. We have people being put in, you know, very poor quality housing and having their lifespans reduced as a result. We have people having to eat very poor quality food and having their lifespans reduced as a result. We have people in poor conditions who are getting sick and then dying because of this. And this is really the same sort of thing as this Irish potato famine thing. The market says these people have to live in these conditions that make them sick and, you know, kill them.
Yeah.
And we say, well, they have to die because that's what the market says.
Right. And I mean, just recently, I think like a couple of days ago, there was a big news story in Christchurch about, you know, someone that went along to hospital because they weren't feeling unwell. They got basically, you know, turned away or sort of, you know, let go out of the hospital system, and they died within, you know, a few hours of being kicked out. So I mean, that's a situation where because of funding constraints, people aren't getting the attention they need, and then they're actually dying as a result. Maybe you could tell us a bit about how, you know, a social welfare system can help Mr. 9 to 5 who, you know, works every day and has never actually needed to get that social help.
Yeah. It's a good question. You know, why
should we care?
Why should we care? Why should we pay people who aren't working? And I think the way to address this question is sort of to turn it on its head a little bit. So the thing is, Mr. 9 to 5, as he currently exists, cannot exist without beneficiaries on the other side, cannot exist without unemployment. And the truth of it is,
there's always going to be some fraction of society that is between work or can't get a job.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, the system which has produced Mr. 9 to 5 is also producing these beneficiaries. And the thing is, you look at the 1970s, and back then unemployment never went over 2%. You know, you'd hit a shock and you'd see the unemployment graph go boop, and there's a little blip, and that's it. It never went above 2%. Right. And then suddenly we have all these neoliberal reforms that come in. Our whole job market, which used to be that if you wanted a job, you could get a job, just suddenly was gone. And in the 80s, you see this massive spike, and unemployment goes all the way up to, I think, something around 10%. That's massive. And now we sit and we're like, oh, cool. We have a low level of unemployment as it sits. Unemployment sitting at 5%. That's, you know, maybe 4 times the amount that it used to sit at in the 70s.
Right, yeah. And is it so? That's the current government standards on unemployment. About 5%.
Yeah. So that's the number from the government.
You know, haven't they changed what counts as unemployment? Because, you know, it does. The thing about unemployment is that, you know, if you're employed, that should be the money that you have enough to live on. Whereas, I think at the moment the unemployment standards. I'll link to this, but the unemployment standards include people that are on part-time jobs. They include people that are in education, and they include people that are on, you know, very small number of hours, you know, perhaps because they can't get more hours. But, you know, these people, I think the term is the working poor. They don't have enough to actually, you know, maintain or get by or actually get further ahead. And I guess the other thing I was going to say about, that just listening to what you're saying about that is that, you said in the 1970s it was a matter of, you want a job, you can go out and get a job. That attitude that's possible still exists today, and that a lot of people of that generation still think hey just you're not applying if you're unemployed, you're not applying yourself, you can just go out there and get a job. Whereas I guess the market's changed so much, and it's less about it's a lot more about who and there's a lot more limited job opportunities now.
Yeah, I think the thing to bear in mind with that is when you look at the 1970s with that 1% unemployment, that's probably about the level of unemployment that you should expect.
And that you sort of always have in a system the way that we have.
Yeah, exactly, because you've got people between jobs and you have people who can't work or aren't working for some reason or another, or people who don't need to work. And so that 1% unemployment, it's probably about as low as it's ever going to get. You're never going to get 0%. But then when you look at our unemployment as it currently sits, we're sitting, 5-6%, and you hit a financial issue and suddenly things spike up a little bit, or times get better and things drop. And I mean, when you're talking about this ideology, this attitude of some people, which is, if you want a job, you can go out and get a job. Actually, no, the numbers say that's not true. There's 5-6% of the population who are able to work who can't, and it's not their decision. It's not that 1/20th of the population go, oh yeah, no, I'm just not going to work. That's the situation for maybe that 1%. But that 5%, these are people who are desperately looking for jobs. It's not like they're not trying. It's just that they can't find them, and this is a product of the system. This is the great thing to bear in mind when you're thinking, Mr. 9 to 5, why should he care about beneficiaries? And the thing is, he should care about beneficiaries because it's the system producing both the Mr. 9 to 5s and the beneficiaries, and so it should be the responsibility of the system to deal with both of those people.
Right. Yeah. I guess, do you think there's a lot of disconnect between people that have been on the benefit compared to those who just never sort of really struggled that much, or never really... I mean, there are people that feel like they're poor or hard done by when they're sort of, still making a lot of money because it's difficult to pay their taxes, or it's difficult to sort of, make their mortgage payments. But, do you think there's a lot of disconnect between those people and then people that actually genuinely at the bottom sort of struggling to... maybe get their car warranted or, get medical expenses paid?
So I think the divide doesn't really sit within that realm of beneficiaries versus workers, because as we were just talking about, the working poor are people who are in this situation where they are so very, very close to the experience of beneficiaries. They have jobs, but not enough money to support themselves. And so I think the divide comes in between that sort of sector of society, people who have a hard time finding work, people who have a hard time getting sufficient work to support them and their families, and then on the other side are people who are in a position they don't have to struggle. So that sort of I'm sort of loath to use the word, but sort of lower class, middle class. It feels like that's really where the divide sits now.
It just seems like there's a bit of a disconnect. I mean, there's a few sort of cliches out there about beneficiaries I guess we'll go into, but just the idea that these people are fundamentally different from the people that actually worked hard and got a job. It's not that it's not necessarily no one wants to be poor. It's not necessarily that they're in these circumstances because that's the result of definitive choices they've decided to make, as opposed to just circumstances that have happened. And I guess getting that message out there. Yeah,
I think the whole middle class thing as well comes down to a lot of the people who are in maybe professional roles, or people who have managed to pick up a couple of houses back in the early 2000s or the 90s when houses were affordable and have been living off the capital gains and things like that. And it's indicative of this sort of like growing divide between New Zealanders. We have, beneficiaries and people who are struggling to survive on one hand, and then on the other hand, we have people who are really creaming it.
Yeah, well, the thing is that the problem that we have at the moment is that we have a situation where once you actually get to a certain barrier, then everything else is a lot easier. Let's talk a bit about beneficiaries. So one of the things that's going around at the moment is that, that there's that cliche that, people aspire to, not having to do anything with their lives, just living around and doing nothing and being on the benefit.
I'm sure everybody's met someone who has said offhand, or perhaps genuinely meant it, oh yeah, it's great having this number of kids, that number of kids, so that we get extra benefit money. But that maybe you've met one person or two people, whatever.
So that's the outlier.
They are really the outliers. Every single beneficiary I've met wants to be out there working and is trying their hardest to be out there working. But instead, we have, people throwing accusations that beneficiaries are, creaming it. The benefit is a pittance.
Right.
And as we've discussed already, the whole unemployment thing, it's not that,
it's not that they don't want a job, it's possibly that they can't get a job.
Exactly.
Right. So tell me a bit more about what you see are the downsides of being on the benefit, because they'll probably be quite good for people that have never actually been there.
Well, the big thing is poverty, right? And all of the trappings that come with that. So you have starvation. The accommodation supplement is 12 years out of date. And so you have a good chunk of your main benefit going to try and pay the rent, pay the power. And so when it comes to...
And where does that sort of extra come from if you're not getting enough money in?
Yeah, exactly. When it comes to, your bills going out each week, the first one is rent. And a lot of people have their benefit automatically going to their landlord. Then the next one's power, and then the next one's food. Yeah. And the thing is that after your expenses and everything are deducted, and after your debt repayments from WINZ and things like that are deducted, you can end up with hardly anything for food. And so
people literally starve while living in a house and being on the benefit, but just not having enough money for the basic sort of dietary requirements.
And imagine if you're in the situation where you have some kids. Of course, everyone puts their kids first. Yeah. And so you try and feed your kids, and then what are you eating? Yeah.
Which is a terrible proposition, because for example, let's take people to an aeroplane. When they say make sure you secure your seatbelt before you're securing your kids, because you actually have to be in pretty good condition to take care of a kid. It's very draining. It's very physical. It's very mentally exhausting. And if you're starving yourself because you don't want to see your kid starve, then you're not at your peak performance in terms of looking after that kid. So you're really sort of not able to give them everything that they need.
Yeah. Another big one, which I mentioned a little bit, is debt. So work and income really don't give you your entitlements, right? That if you go in and you say, I don't have a washing machine and I need to go to the laundromat every day or every week, and it's chowing through the money that I have.
Yeah, so like bus fare.
Yeah, sure.
It's like $4 for a washing or something like that.
Your case manager is not going to say to you, you can actually get an advance on your benefit and get a washing machine. Right. They just don't tell you that. Nobody that I've ever talked to has known, you can get TVs as an advance, because it's an essential. That's your connection to the world. That's how you know what's going on. That's how you entertain your kids. You can get cell phones if you need them. You can get fridges or any matter of whiteware. You can
cell
get
phone
beds.
Important to job hunting.
Exactly.
Whiteware, important to dietary requirements.
Exactly. All of this stuff. They're just life essentials.
Yeah.
It's something that everyone should have. And so WINZ can actually provide you with advances for it, but nobody knows. And then when you go and apply to your case manager, unless you have someone who really knows what they're on about, the case manager will just go, no, we can't give you that.
So these advances, tell me a bit more about them, because it sounds like you're, borrowing money that you don't have in order to have something that's essential and, a fundamental part of, your human rights.
Yeah, it's quite an odd one, really. So with the advance system, you can go on and apply for as much advances as you need, as often as you need them. And WINZ will often tell you that you can't, but if you play by the actual rules, you can. It's just them lying to you. But you can go and you can get washing machines, whiteware, all of that stuff, and you have to bring a quote in for pretty much everything except for the whiteware. The whiteware, they've got a weird arrangement with Fisher and Paykel, and you have to use that supplier.
Wow.
It
seems a bit backward.
Yeah, but
and it means that you can't buy a second hand.
Exactly. So it means that the cost that you pay.
Wait. So you're forcing beneficiaries, the poorest people in our society, to go and buy a brand name appliance.
Yes.
Because of some deal you've got where that appliance maker gets profits.
It's actually
crazy. That's insane. That's like a protected monopoly.
And it's actually written into the legislation as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I wonder how much Fisher and Paykel paid for that. Crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, it is. Yeah. It does seem like a very dodgy deal.
When I was poor, I'd never buy brand new things because
exactly.
You can pay $800 for a fridge, or you can buy a decent secondhand one for $200, or you can get a real shit one that's pops open every now and then, defrosts all your food for about $50, and that $50 option is sometimes the best option you have. And I mean, if this is people's own money that they're borrowing, like they have to pay these loans back.
Yeah, and you don't get to choose.
That's crazy. That's like going to Harvey Norman and them saying, okay, cool, so you can get finance, but you're only allowed to buy this one type of washing machine, and it's got to be the $700 model, and we don't care about anything else that you want. You don't need a 200-litre washing machine. Tough, you're getting that one.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's it. So there's a range of different options depending on how big your household is. But yeah, you're forced to buy those if you're buying whiteware. Yeah. I've been in a lot of times with people who have gone and collected quotes for second-hand washing machines, but the legislation says you're not allowed.
And also it's hard, for example, your second-hand quotes, like the only places they're going to give you a quote is like Cash Converters or one of those pawnbrokers, and those quotes are far more inflated than, for example, something off Trade Me or Facebook Buy Sell.
Yeah, so you can't buy anything off Trade Me. But
so you're literally paying the profits for Cash Converters as opposed to just buying direct from someone that's actually going to give you a good price. And remember, this is people's money. Like, this is their benefit they've already, they get. Yeah. So they're being penalised.
Yeah, often I've seen people get quotes from Salvation Army store or op shops
so at
or
least
things like this. And then there's other little joints that'll repair whiteware or things like that. Right,
so there's a few sort of options.
Okay. But yeah, quite often you do end up at pawnbrokery type places. But yeah, so you bring in some quotes, and then inevitably your case manager will say, well, this isn't the cheapest option. I know you can get cheaper. And so essentially to convince them, you have to go and bring in 3 quotes or something like this and say, look, I'm going for the cheapest option.
Wow.
It's really, really backwards. And so obviously the way you do it is you go and you get the one that is suitable for your needs, because they'll try and push you into a different one anyway. And then you go and get a couple other quotes for similar things that are higher.
Yeah, just so you can actually get the one that's actually suitable.
Yeah, because otherwise they'll go, oh, why do you need such this expensive...
and this is still their money.
Yeah, that's the thing. So this is an advance payment on benefits. So it's essentially an interest-free loan, but they will deduct money out of your benefit.
Yeah.
And so you go out and you buy a bed for yourself and beds for all of your kids and all of that. And
so we're talking, I mean, the thing is, the thing, this kind of blows your mind if you actually look into it deeply, because we're talking about fundamental rights. Like, okay, let's say you have a fridge. I actually didn't have a fridge when I was growing up because my mum couldn't afford one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we would, we'd buy only a small thing of milk. It's small to buy stuff in smaller quantities than it is to buy in bulk. So you could only buy a small thing of milk because otherwise it would go off, and you'd have so much more food wastage and spoilage. It means you can't sort of take advantage of the specials. So I mean, there's stuff like that. There's stuff about having the proper amounts of sort of food in the house so that your family isn't going hungry, and so that you can actually have a balanced meal. So in a lot of ways, a fridge is very vital, and yet we're saying, okay, well, you've got to jump through all these hoops, and also these are people that can't afford this, and we're making them borrow money, get into debt, to get these basic sort of things that are actually quite important.
Yeah.
And this isn't money. Like, that's the thing about a budget. Like, usually when you work, you've got discretionary income, whereas the WINZ benefits, they're usually fixed at like, okay, this is the bare minimum you need to survive. So anything that comes out of that is really crippling.
Yeah, and so the way that it works, so let's say you purchase a bunch of beds, or you've just moved into a new place and you don't have anything, so you have to purchase everything. And maybe that'll add up to $2,000 or $3,000 if you've got a family. And the standard that WINZ has is that you have to pay it back over a 2-year period. And so that's about 100 weeks. So if you divide that $2,000-3,000 by 100, that's $20-30 a week that's coming out of your benefit.
Yeah.
And it's just ridiculous when you're on the bare minimum that you need to survive. And sometimes you see families who have $50-60 a week to go and buy food with.
Yeah.
And then imagine having...
Well, I spend like $70 or $80 a week on food just for myself.
Exactly.
I can't imagine feeding a family on less than that. That's crazy.
It's really ridiculous.
All right, let's move on, because that's a bit it's probably covered, and we don't want to sort of take too long to just marvel at how bad the system is. Okay, so we were talking about the downsides of welfare, and then we're talking about the sort of debt system, and I think it really comes down to just there's so many reasons why being on welfare is not a nice stress-free life, and I just sort of butt into sort of what you're saying as well, because I remember, when my mum was on the benefit, and let's say that we had a problem with our car, we couldn't get it warranted fitness. You're creating these cascading choices where, like, okay, I can't afford to get my car warranted because there's this thing that I can't afford to get fixed. So you've got two choices. You can not spend money on food and get that thing fixed, or try and save up to get that thing fixed. Sometimes it's more than you can do from just a couple of weeks. Or you can drive around with an unwarranted vehicle, but then if you get caught, you're up for a massive fine. So that's bad. I remember, having to go for, a food parcel because, something on our car broke down and we couldn't afford to do food and to fix the car. And the cars, can be quite a crucial, necessary thing to get to school or to do, your job. So there's so many things that are going into when you're poor. Anything that requires extra money is extreme financial stress that you can't meet, and that you've got to then go in to make bad choices. You've got several options available, all of them bad, to try and meet that. So it just seems like there's so many reasons why you wouldn't want to be on welfare, and it's not an easy, happy life.
100%.